Today we're going to look at barefoot shoes. So I've been wanting to do a video on barefoot shoes for like years, and I've been wearing them for I don't know how many years, several years, and wearing them exclusively. So the only shoes I wear are barefoot shoes, and barefoot shoes are usually defined as shoes that have zero drop, which means the distance from the ball of your foot to the heel of your foot is the same. So most normal shoes that you buy in the store have some sort of raised heel, and barefoot shoes do not. The other thing that makes barefoot shoes barefoot is they usually have thinner soles, and they're more flexible and allow your feet to move around more. They usually have a wider toe box, which allows your toes to spread more than regular shoes do, and they're overall supposed to be good for you. So what does this have to do with the sailboat and sailing? Is actually barefoot shoes were originally invented or marketed to sailboat racers, because barefoot shoes, specifically the Vibram 5-finger shoes that you normally think of when you think of barefoot shoes, these things right here, they are supposed to give your feet grip, especially on a boat that can be wet and slippery and you're trying to move around and you want your feet to stick to the boat. These offer some degree of protection and also allow your feet to stick to the boat and replicate that barefoot feeling. So Vibram, that brand right there, you've probably seen their soles on lots of other types of shoes because they normally make soles for shoes. This particular shoe actually originated from a Married with Children episode. If you remember Married with Children, Al Bundy was a shoe salesman, and I think it was another salesman that he worked with or something came up with this idea on one of the episodes as being a more natural shoe, and called it something like God's shoe. And a designer saw the episode and built on that and came up with this shoe, and Vibram picked up on it and decided to market it toward to sailors and also to runners. And the big famous guy in the barefoot world is a guy named Barefoot Ted, and he was the CEO of Vibram USA, I believe, and he ran the Boston Marathon in a pair of these when they launched the shoe. And the idea of being barefoot kind of comes, I guess, within the last 30 or 40 years or so, and a lot of it comes from a book by a guy named Chris McDougall, and he is a long distance runner, ultra marathon type runner, and he lived and ran with the Tarahumara Indians that I think are in present day Mexico or somewhere in Latin America, and they run like miles and miles and miles, and they do it like barefoot or just with little sandal, like these type sandals on that are just really a sole tied to your foot. So the basic premise is that through millions of years of evolution, your feet were designed to be barefoot. So if you look at your foot, one of the key parts of your foot is the arch. And if you imagine like an arch, any load that's put on this part of your foot is transferred off to the side to that part of your foot. Now on any arch, if you think of like an arch bridge or an arch over a doorway, if you were to push up on this part here, you weaken the overall arch until the arch eventually would collapse. So modern shoes, which have arch supports and big, thick, cushiony soles, were actually developed, I guess, in the 60s or so, when Nike and started developing running shoes and those types of sport shoes and shoes with arches or pronounced arches. So it's a relatively new occurrence that people have shoes that have arches in them. So you go back millions of years, your feet are designed to be barefoot, and then all of a sudden we come up with these shoes that are more, quote, comfortable, that they actually weaken your arch, cause foot problems, cause knee problems, cause hip problems, and so that's kind of where the barefoot shoe movement comes from. Now, my first barefoot shoes that I had were actually not the Vibram Five Fingers, but from Merrell. So Merrell makes probably one of the, I would say they're probably one of the biggest makers of barefoot shoes, at least commercially widely available. So this is a picture of my most recent pair of Merrell shoes, and these are their barefoot lined. And the big difference between the Merrell barefoot shoes and the Vibram shoes, you can tell, of course, the Vibram has the toe pockets, whereas the Merrell shoes are just, they look like regular shoes, but they have Xero drop from the ball of your foot to the heel. And these particular Merrell shoes in particular are very flexible, and you can bunch them up like that. The sole is very thin. The first ones that I had were not this type, but they were what was called the Merrell Tough Glove, and it was like a leather version of this that had a very thin leather, and was probably the best pair of shoes that I've ever owned. And unfortunately, Merrell stopped making those. I like them because they had the leather, so it was a good shoe that you could wear, you know, with khakis, or, you know, and I wore them to work all the time. And then they stopped making them, and then most of their barefoot shoes were like these, like tennis shoe look. These, I think, are the Vapor gloves, the last generation. And that's one of the things I don't like about the Merrell shoes, is they come out with a new generation every couple years or so, and you know, they don't seem to make them better, and they don't always stay the same. So like, I've had Merrells, you know, for years, and this is actually probably my third pair of this exact model. So I have had 3 pairs of the exact same model, exact same color, and but they wear out. And that's the one thing with these shoes. You can see the sole on these. The sole wears out relatively quickly, especially because I wear them a lot, and maybe kind of hard on shoes. The other one here, you can see that one has worn through all the way through. And so I can't wear these anymore, because as soon as it starts to rain, water starts getting in them. But I love these shoes. They just wear out fast, especially for the cost. One of the biggest disadvantages of barefoot shoes is actually finding shoes that you can wear, like, to work. If you have to work in a place where you know, have to dress up fairly nice, it's hard to wear these, you know, if you're trying to dress up, because they're not very dressy shoes. It's especially hard to wear these if you're trying to dress up. So there are a few places that actually make more dressier barefoot shoes. Here's one of them that I've tried. This is Lems, and Lems, it's technically a barefoot shoe because it's Xero drop, but it's definitely a solid shoe. Like, it's not like a barefoot shoe. It's a little bit like a barefoot shoe. They are pretty flexible. They have the wider toe box, and they're Xero drop, so they have that benefit. But the sole's fairly thick. You don't get the same ground feel that you do with the Merrell type shoes. But I've worn these for a while. Lems is the company that makes them out of Boulder, Colorado. And they have several different types. A lot of them that are dressier shoes that you can wear, like these. Now, to tie this into the whole boat thing, like I said, these shoes were developed by, or originally marketed toward, sailboat racers, because they provide some grip. And you can see, like, this looks like it's smooth, but when you flex it, that opens up, and it gives you a lot of grip on the shoe. But one of the things with shoes on a boat, you kind of have two schools of thought with that. There are those people who say, you know, who go barefoot. The disadvantage to going barefoot on a boat is you have all these things all over the boat, like blocks and things coming out of the deck and everything, that if you catch a toe on those things, that kind of hurts, and people break their toes that way all the time. So the Vibram shoes are supposed to provide a little bit more protection. You still have, because they separate the toes though, you still have the problem where you could get, you know, your pinky toe caught in something and end up, you know, separating it from the rest of your toes and breaking it. But that's kind of what they were targeted for. The other school of thought on boats, if you're not going, you know, 100% barefoot, is that you're wearing some kind of shoe like Sperry's or something that has a hard sole. The thing I don't like about those is, to me, especially shoes like Sperry's and Converse, is it almost feels like the sole is so hard and so inflexible that it feels like you have like a ping pong paddle strapped to the bottom of your foot. And to me, that is not comfortable at all, and you have no ground feel, the proprioception, that your body develops with barefoot shoes kind of helps you have balance. And if you step on something like a line or something like that, if you're on a hard-soled shoe, you can easily twist your ankle that way. If you're on a shoe like this, it's a little more forgiving, and you're not necessarily going to topple over and sprain your ankle and fall off the boat. So one of the big, I guess, disadvantages of the five-finger shoes is that they attract a lot of attention. You end up having people who will stop you and say, "Oh, what do you got on your feet?" Which is odd. The other thing is wearing these shoes. If you have a teenage daughter, you're not allowed to wear these shoes in public when you're with your daughter. The Merrells, at least, they look somewhat like a shoe, and if somebody looks closely at them, usually they can tell those aren't normal shoes. And I've had people comment on these thinking that they're either rock climbing shoes or ballet shoes or wrestling shoes or something like that. But they attract less attention than the Vibram Five Fingers do. The Merrell Tough Glove shoes that I originally started out with, I loved those shoes. They were super comfortable. The leather was super nice. They lasted a long time. And then they stopped making them. Now I noticed while I was looking for my newest pair of shoes that they have a new leather glove shoe. It looks a little beefier though than the Tough Glove, which is something that I don't like. And they got bad reviews. Like, for some reason, a lot of the reviews on the newest leather version of the Merrell shoe is they had bad reviews that they'd fall apart easy, that poor craftsmanship and stuff in the shoe, which I think seems to have been a trend overall in Merrell shoes. And I've noticed with different, because I've had probably by now dozens of these Merrell barefoot shoes over the last several years. And one of the first thing to go always is the sole, and the sole wears out. And granted, I use these, I play tennis in these, play pickleball in these, so that kind of eats through soles of shoes, and that's probably why these are as bad as they are. But the other thing that I've noticed with the Merrell shoes is on some models, you'll get some of the breaks, or where the cloth attaches to the rubber, you'll get separation in breaks, especially in this area right here where it flexes. They usually have like a little rubber piece right here, and that little rubber piece, with all the flexing that it gets, tends to separate. With the Vibram five-finger shoes, the Vibram five-finger shoes, the biggest thing that happens to these, I've had a couple pairs of these, not as many as the Merrells, but at least 2 or 3 pairs of these shoes that I've owned. And the biggest problem with these actually is right here, where the spandex attaches to the rubber, and that will separate. In fact, I think on this pair of shoes, it's not this one, it's the one I have on my left foot right now, it's already starting to separate right in one of the toes. Now, the benefits of barefoot shoes. So what I have noticed since I've been wearing them in the last several years is I have fewer knee problems. My feet are a lot stronger, and I have fewer ankle problems. I've had a couple of ankles twisted, where in the past that probably would have been a pretty bad sprained ankle, but I think these things definitely toughen up your feet. The other thing that I noticed is my feet actually are smaller than they used to be, and they say that's not unusual. I think I've gone down at least a half size. I used to be a size 10 in shoes, and now everything I wear is a size 9.5. So they say that actually happens because you start building the muscles and your feet start contracting, and it makes your shoe size smaller. The other thing, the benefit is you definitely improve your proprioception. So proprioception is how your body feels around the environment that it's in. So as far as like your balance and your movement and just kind of feeling and responding to the world as you move around, I think that improves, especially with regard to your feet and your legs. The other thing that actually improves, I think, with barefoot shoes is your calf muscles and your Achilles tendon area. So one of the problems that a lot of people have when they wear barefoot shoes is they start to develop problems specifically with the Achilles tendon. and you start to get tendonitis in your Achilles tendon, which had happened to me when I first started doing it, and especially running in them. So like on occasion I will go through fits where I'll run, a bit, 3, 4, 5, 6 miles at a time wearing barefoot shoes. And when I first started doing that, it definitely, my Achilles tendon would be really, really sore, and it would get to the point, where it's inflamed and tendonitis, and I think the trick to that is you just have to get used to that movement, because automatically when you switch to barefoot shoes, your Achilles tendon is going to has to extend more than it does when you're wearing regular shoes. Because if you have shoes that have a heel rise, your Achilles tendon is never fully extending. It's that extra little inch that you have, or half inch that you have in your sole, is not letting your Achilles tendon extend to its fullest point, and it's especially noticeable when you run. And I think a lot of people try barefoot shoes and they end up having, those types of problems, and then they say, oh, I don't like these shoes, and they get rid of them. And actually most of the barefoot shoes that I own, I have purchased on eBay. You used to be able to find like brand new pairs of barefoot shoes on eBay, because people would buy them, try them for a week or so, and decide they didn't like them. More recently, it's been harder to find good pairs on eBay. So most of the barefoot shoes that I have now, I have had to buy new. And buying the shoes new, it irritates me to no end, because it seems like they're way more expensive than they should be. And a pair of Vibram 5 fingers, $125 easily. A pair of the Merrells, at least $100, unless you get them on sale, and then they rarely go on sale. So the price to me seems high, but I think that could be partly me getting older and thinking, oh, that seems way too much to pay for a pair of shoes. I remember when I could buy a pair of shoes for a nickel. So I think compared to other shoes, they're probably the same. You probably can't get a decent pair of shoes for less than around $100 unless you get them on sale. So I think that, maybe they're on par with regular shoes. Even still, as far as regular shoes go, they have a lot more material in them than this. So you would think that these would be cheaper than regular shoes, but they're not. It seems like they're more expensive. My newest pair of shoes that I have is from Xero shoes, and it's Xero spelled Xero. And I think that they originally started as like a Kickstarter type campaign, and with all the same kind of barefoot things that barefoot shoe companies talk about, but they were supposed to be better and more like the sandal type shoe where you have the sole that's tied onto your foot. And the Xero shoe, I thought I would like it. They get a lot of good reviews, and it's supposed to be this cutting edge barefoot shoe, and I don't like it as much as the Merrell shoe, which I kind of wanted to like the Xero shoe because it's a small company, and maybe more, they claim to be more environmentally responsible and that sort of thing. So I kind of wanted to like them, but I don't think they're as good as the Merrell. And I think the main reason is because the sole is, the Merrell uses the Vibram sole, which I really like. It's super flexible, and it seems like it's also more contoured to fit the bottom of your foot. But the Xero shoe is flatter, it's rubber, it doesn't seem as flexible as the Vibram, which may make it last longer, but it feels to me again like having a ping pong paddle strapped to the bottom of my foot. And even like when you're walking in the Xero shoes, I feel like I start to have the clomp, 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 clomp thing going as that flat sole smacks onto the ground every time. And every time, I notice too with the Xero soles is they're very squeaky. So like in my when I go to work at school, it sounds like I'm in playing basketball or something, because it seems like the shoe is always squeaking on the floors, whereas you never have that happen with the Vibram soles. The other thing that I don't really like about the Xero shoe is, like, if you look at the Merrell, it's even the upper is very thin. So the upper there's not a lot to it. It's very thin. You can wear these without socks, and sometimes I will. Usually when I'm on the boat, I'll wear them without socks, and then I'll take them off and just go barefoot on the boat. But the Xero shoe, you can't really It's much thicker. The upper is much more padded. It's almost more like the Lems shoe here, where it has this big padding around the ankle area, and they're not comfortable wearing them without socks. And if you do try to wear them without socks, my feet get all sweaty. My feet won't get sweaty in these, even without socks. And the other advantage to this is these shoes, you can throw them in the washer and wash them, really easily. Throw them in the washer and dryer. So if you do wear them without socks and they start to stink or whatever, you just pitch them in the washer. Where the Xero shoes, they don't look like that you can throw them in the washer. They look like a regular pair of tennis shoes with a 0 drop flat sole. Now, what would I recommend if you were looking to get into barefoot shoes? I would recommend starting with something like the Merrell shoe and wearing them part-time at first, because you will get the tendonitis issues and the problems with your calves and being really sore. And start out part-time and kind of work your way into them, because it does take some adjustment. I mean, especially if you've been wearing tennis shoes that are bad for your feet your entire life, then your feet are not going to be used to that extra stress that you're putting on them. But in the long run, the extra stress will strengthen your foot and make your foot work like it's supposed to work. So I highly recommend barefoot shoes, but it just takes some getting used to, and you can't jump into it and just wear them all the time and run. Especially running, I think, was probably the worst for me starting out, is trying to run, because then your calf muscles are definitely doing a ton of work and you're stretching that Achilles tendon out a lot. Walking is much easier, so definitely walking at first, and then easing your way into running with them if you run. So but I think it's doable for most people. I know I always try to talk my wife into doing barefoot shoes, because she complains about her ankle problems and foot problems and things like that. And to me, my way of thinking is that, well, you have ankle problems and foot problems because of your footwear, and she always has to have the perfect shoe that has the right amount of support and all these things, and eventually you get dependent on that, those shoes, and you need more and more support because you're weakening your feet. The more you support something, and it works with any body part, the more you support it, the weaker it gets, and the more support that you're going to need later. I mean, it works with, you get a sprain, or any type of problem, ligament problems or muscle problems. The more you stabilize that joint and not use it, the worse it's going to be in the long run for that joint. So it just makes sense that it would be the same with your feet. So I think that's all for today. I'll wrap this up, and I don't know what I'm going to do next. I know in the next video I wanted to do this one because I've always wanted to do a barefoot shoe review, and I kind of tied it into the sailing thing as best I could. But I don't know what I'm going to do next. As far as projects go, I'm still varnishing the companionway. I still need to do the inside of the companionway, so that's still to come. I was thinking about some sewing projects to do over the winter. One of the things I want to try is a bag for the spinnaker. So we have the spinnaker that's in a bag that has this big hoop around it that's supposed to make it easier to put the spinnaker in, but unfortunately the hoop is so large that it's difficult to get in the cockpit lazarette. So I was thinking about either making a new rectangular shaped bag for that will fit in the lazarette easier, or taking that bag, taking the hoop out of it, and trying to do something with that, or adjust it some with the sewing machine or whatever. I also have to, in the back, as far as sewing goes, the cover for the wheel and the binnacle, I have to do a new cover, because I put that new GPS on there, and it sits up higher with the GPS mount than the previous one did. The cover doesn't fit properly, so I'm going to have to redo that. It needed fixed anyway, so I may end up having to just redo the entire thing. And a couple other little things here and there that I noticed might need some work with sewing. So those are probably my sewing projects for the winter. But that's all for now, and I'm going to go ahead and see you all later.